Be open to changing your mind. It is often a sign of growth. Above all else, do not lie. Learn how to say I'm sorry. My determination and my hard work and my ambition met with fortune. Your standardized ideologies will not always fit your life because life is messy. Have friends, many friends, or just one friend. Hold your family close. Put the damned phone down.
The Lionesses of Africa are a very, very elite class of young and older women who have chosen to take the path well less traveled, the path really that you would think they shouldn't have taken. They have left comfort for passion. And this is what we get in today's lioness, Chimamanda, who is a very, very acclaimed writer and has won so many prizes and whose books are read all over the world. Rule number 1 from our writer, storyteller, and feminist Chimamanda is have an open mind.
When I graduated from undergrad, I felt unmoored. The structure of expectations was gone. No more classes to attend, no more papers to write. And the world felt wide open, disorienting, dizzying. I was full of contradictions, and I was in a battle with myself about my contradictions because I did not know then that it is human and okay to have contradictions. I was full of uncertainty, and I did not know that confidence is a journey, a continuous journey, and not an absolute destination. And I want to tell you this now to save you years of figuring it out yourself. There are days when you will be bursting with certainty, and days when you will be flattened by doubts. And it helps a little to keep in mind how universal this is. There are so many things I said I would never do when I was younger, and I now do many of them. I would give you detailed examples, but I don't want to unnecessarily alarm you. The point is, be open to changing your mind. It is often a sign of growth. Be open to the possibility that you might be wrong. Ideology is a good thing, but if you find that you hew unquestioningly to every orthodoxy of the ideology you subscribe to, then maybe it's time for some agility in your thinking. A small shift, for example, a sign that shows that you know that there are complicated shades of gray everywhere.
Rule number 2, do not lie.
Above all else, do not lie. Or don't lie too often. Which is really to say, tell the truth. But lying, the word, the idea, the act, has such political potency in America today that it somehow feels more apt. Above all else, do not lie. I grew up in Nigeria through military dictatorships and through incipient democracies. And America always felt aspirational. When yet another absurd thing happened politically, we would say, this can never happen in America. But today, the political discourse in America includes questions that are straight from the land of the absurd. Questions such as, should we call a lie a lie? When is a lie a lie? And so, class of 2018, at no time has it felt as urgent as now that we must protect and value the truth. Before I tell you about not lying, I must first admit So before I tell you about not lying, I must first admit to lying. I routinely lie about my height, even at the doctor's office. In Lagos, when I'm meeting friends for lunch, I lie about being stuck in traffic when I'm really still at home, only just getting dressed. Now, there are other lies. Sadly, however, I cannot tell you about them without having to kill you afterwards. But what I know is that I have always felt my best and done my best when I veer toward truth, when I don't lie. And the biggest regrets of my life are of those times when I did not have the courage to embrace the truth. Now, telling the truth does not mean that everything will work out. Actually, it sometimes doesn't. I'm not asking you to tell the truth because it will always work out, but because you will sleep well at night. And there is nothing more beautiful than to wake up every day holding in your hand the full measure of your integrity.
Rule number 3, and this applies especially to the generation that's growing up: put the damn phone down.
Now, please allow me to give a condensed version of a rant that I frequently deliver to my nephews and nieces, a rant which, by the way, has remained ineffectual. The rant is this: put the damned phone down. Well, at least for a few hours a day. Read a book, talk to other human beings. And when you do pick up the phone again, before you tweet or Snapchat or Instagram, call your parents. Or call an aunt. Or go outside and do something that you will not be photographing or videotaping for social media. So in the grand scheme of things, views and likes on social media really mean nothing. Okay, that's not true. They do mean something, in the way that they represent a fleeting but still enjoyable validation. And of course, now in the age of something called social media influencers, they can be monetized. So it is not that being on social media doesn't matter. It does matter. It does have its good uses. But the question is how much social media should matter. How much space social media should occupy in your life. Less than it did in college, I would suggest. I would suggest, too, that you be very clear about the artifice that social media is, and that you try and have real connections with actual people that you actually know. Too much social media is like eating too much of a moist, too sweet, too rich, too everything cake. You like it while you're stuffing yourself, but afterwards you feel less than good, and you realize you would have been better off with a little less cake. I speak from experience, by the way, not with social media, but with cake.
Rule number 4, applying to everyone: learn to say, I am sorry.
Please learn how to say, I'm sorry. Journalism seems to be a profession whose practitioners have great difficulty in saying, I'm sorry, without hedging or equivocating. And speaking of saying sorry, knowing how to say, I'm sorry, and mean, I'm sorry, will serve you well, no matter what course your life takes. And if you are one of those people whose tongues seem unable to form those words, I'm sorry, there is hope. Practicing in front of a mirror helps. Don't change the subject. Don't pretend that nothing happened. Don't buy a gift and deflect. Don't ride it out in silence, hoping it will go away. Just say, I'm sorry. A few times if necessary. And of course, it helps if you actually mean it.
Rule number 5, and this is my personal favorite: read and keep learning.
So not long after I published my second novel, I received a message from a friend who was at a very good college here in the US. And the message was, your book is on the syllabus. It's required reading. You've finally arrived. This, of course, was wonderful news. I was flattered and pleased. At the same time, I was applying to graduate school, and one of the schools I was applying to was the same college where my work was being studied. Now, when I told my friend about this, she did not understand. Why, she asked, would you go back to school when you finally arrived? But I wanted to go back to school because I woke up every morning thinking of how little I knew and how much I was yet to know. I still feel that way. I think of myself as a perpetual student because knowledge is never complete. And so, as you prepare to soar away on your eagle wings today, as you graduate with your hard-earned degrees, please don't think of today as the day you stop being a student. Be a student for the rest of your life. And the best way to do this is to read every day, preferably books, but otherwise anything continuous and relatively long, which means Twitter doesn't count. And what you read should also have proper punctuation and spellings, which means that text messages don't count.
Rule number 6, avoid falling into the trap of telling a single story.
I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria, I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow, we ate mangoes, and we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination. They opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this. It saved me from having a single story of what books are.
Rule number 7, or more of which like equation number 7, determination, ambition, hard work, and fortune will bring you success.
I was fortunate that an agent took me on, and her words to me were, "I will take a chance on you." I was fortunate that my first novel was published 15 years ago at a time when the American publishing industry was going through a new kind of flexibility and openness. But the thing about luck is that you have to be prepared to meet it. It's just one ingredient out of many. Sometimes you have to nudge fortune a little, sometimes badger fortune, and keep trying, because luck is never enough. Writing is what I love. Writing is my vocation. Had I not had the good fortune of being published, I would be somewhere completely unknown, but I would be writing. And I would also be doing the two things that I consider the essential corollaries of writing: reading and dreaming. But I made the decision to be published. I did the research. I wrote and rewrote stories. I sent out manuscripts. This was in the late 1990s, before email became common. And I spent a lot of the little money I had buying stamps for self-addressed envelopes. And each time I went to the mailbox and saw my own handwriting on a thick envelope, I knew that my manuscript had been sent back. And I would feel sad. And I would give myself a bit of time to be upset. And then I would dust myself up and go look up more literary agent addresses in the library and send off a new batch of manuscripts. I got rejection after rejection, but I kept sending them out. And then I got lucky, which is to say that my determination and my hard work and my ambition met with fortune.
Rule number 8, pursue your passion.
Your standardized ideologies will not always fit your life, because life is messy. When I was growing up in Nigeria, I was expected, as every student who did well was expected, to become a doctor. Deep down, I knew that what I really wanted to do was to write stories. But I did what I was supposed to do, and I went into medical school. I told myself that I would tough it out and become a psychiatrist, and that way I could use my patients' stories for my fiction. But after 1 year of medical school, I fled. I realized I would be a very unhappy doctor, and I really did not want to be responsible for the inadvertent death of my patients. Leaving medical school was a very unusual decision, especially in Nigeria, where it is very difficult to get into medical school. Later, people told me that it had been very courageous of me, but I did not feel courageous at all. What I felt then was not courage, but a desire to make an effort, to try. I could either stay and study something that was not right for me, or I could try and do something different, and so I decided to try. I took the American exams, and I got a scholarship to come to the US, where I could study something that was not related to medicine. Now, it might not have worked out. I might not have been given the American scholarship. My writing might not have ended up being successful. But the point is that I tried. We cannot always bend the world into the shapes we want, but we can try. We can make a concerted and real and true effort. And you are privileged that because of your education here, you have already been given many of the tools that you will need to try. Always just try, because you never know.
Rule number 9, make friends and laugh while at it.
When I started out writing, I was doing what I loved, what gave me the greatest joy, and I hoped also to be read. And today I feel grateful to be read, to be taken seriously, to be here. My work is very important to me. It's central to my life. But the moments of greatest joy for me are not necessarily those that have to do with my success. And so, please nurture your ambitions, seek to be successful, but keep in mind that there are hollows that success will not fill. And yes, this is where I talk about love. I have a Swiss friend who once lived in DC, but now lives in Zurich. And I asked him what he had made of America when he lived here. And he said, Americans don't have friends. because they're too busy working. He meant, I think, people who live in America, whether citizens or not. And so I urge you, class of 2019, to prove him wrong. Have friends, many friends, or just one friend. Hold your family close. And family doesn't necessarily mean those to whom you're related by blood or by social institution. Hold your friends close. Stand up for your loved ones. Tell the people you love that you love them. Tell them often. Find reasons to laugh. Gravitate towards people with whom you never feel that pressure to perform or to be what you're not.
And rule number 10, you don't have to change the whole world. Just change a piece of the world.
Go and change the world. Yes, the language is a little grandiose, actually bordering on meaninglessness. What does it even mean, change the world? But what if we revisited it not as the world, but as one tiny slice of the world, the smallest sliver of the world, one person? Last year, I met a remarkable woman called Vivian Bailey. She was born in 1918 here in Washington, D.C. She's a tiny African-American woman, 100 years old. And since she retired from government in 1975, she's raised money to send care packages to 7 members of the armed forces. She's raised money to make sure that children from an underserved public school close to her get to go on field trips. And when she was asked why she did so much while having so little, she said quite simply, "I like to keep busy." Vivian Bailey taught me that real human impact is never about quantity. It's always about quality. Change the world really means do something. The world is full of unnecessary suffering. Washington, D.C. is full of unnecessary suffering. Vote for a candidate whose policies will reduce suffering. Tutor a child. Mentor a younger person. Volunteer. Stand up for someone. Speak up. There are women all over the world today who feel affirmed, at peace, emboldened, strengthened, simply because another woman somewhere dared to tell her story of sexual harassment. Sometimes it takes one person's story to open someone's eyes, to change a perspective, which can lead to real and meaningful change. Sometimes to be reminded that we are not alone can propel us to keep going. And remember that speaking up is often not just about you, but also about all those who are not able to speak for themselves. Change the world can also be about what you choose not to do. It can mean knowing when to walk on by, knowing when to walk away, knowing when to choose silence.
Now, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If there is any advice that has been given out by Chimamanda which I left out, which you think is important, you may as well write it down in the comments below. And if you disagree with anything that I've said or anything that Chimamanda has said, you can as well also vent and frustrate and show your frustrations and anger in the comments below. Until next time, thank you very much. My name is Maro.